Chainsmoker Cat seemed to shoot into the spotlight almost overnight thanks to that deliberately shocking trailer. Filthy apartments, cigarettes, bad decisions, and a lot of urine and vomit, and a protagonist who looked like an absolute train wreck. I went into the series hoping that was simply the bait, an outrageous trailer designed to get eyeballs on a story that would eventually reveal something much sadder underneath. I wanted Chainsmoker Cat to become something like the anime version of Trainspotting, darkly funny and occasionally disgusting, but ultimately a tragic human story about addiction, self-destruction, and the reasons people keep reaching for something they know will eventually destroy them. Chainsmoker Cat understands what addiction does to a person, but at least by episode 5, it rarely explores why the person needs the addiction in the first place. It really is a story about addiction in all its modern forms. Cigarettes, drugs, sex, alcohol, streaming, popularity, and the desperate need to be noticed. It understands how addiction lowers a person's standards, distorts their priorities, and traps them in worsening living conditions. Now, Japan already has a very real example of young people falling through society's cracks in the Toyoko Kids, people seeking drugs, sex, attention, or simply community because they have nowhere else to go. Chainsmoker Cat brushes against this same territory, but rarely gives its characters the emotional depth that reality deserves. And right now, that is a huge missed opportunity. What it does not yet understand, or perhaps simply does not care to explore, is the emotional needs underneath these addictions. We see what they're addicted to, but rarely what they are trying to escape from. As a result, the series has plenty of observation, but surprisingly little compassion. It understands the shape of addiction, but not yet its soul. Now, with it touching on a variety of different addictions, like I mentioned before, sex, drugs, attention, streaming, etc., I do believe that is a great jumping off board for a potentially fascinating anime. Because addiction isn't always about sitting in a dark room with a needle in your arm. Sometimes it's attention, validation, sex, scrolling, or just one more little hit of a cigarette. But ultimately, solving addiction is about solving the pain underneath it. And because of that, its comedy is starting to take the edge off something that should feel considerably darker, considerably more important. Yanni is essentially trapped in a cycle. She feels miserable, so she smokes. Smoking costs her money, situation gets worse, her living standards deteriorate, she feels worse, she gets stressed, she needs cigarettes. If you've known anyone who's been addicted to anything, you will recognize this pattern. And it's the reasons for the coping mechanism that needs to be explored here. They do touch upon the lowering of living standards. Her apartment does slowly get worse. Her personal hygiene is constantly referenced, she struggles financially pretty clearly, and her relationship with her sister becomes strained. And gradually things that should horrify her just become normal. And I do think that's one of the better things they're doing here. Addiction doesn't always destroy your life overnight. Sometimes it simply convinces you to accept a slightly worse version of yourself every single day. Until eventually you look around you and you realize you've moved the line of what you consider to be acceptable. And what is acceptable to you is barely recognizable to you. But Chainsmoker Cat very rarely allows the darkness to peek through the light of the humor long enough. Because every time it just gets kind of uncomfortable, there's a gag in there, there's something grotesque in there. Her bad hygiene becomes a kind of go-to joke. Her desperation for cigarettes becomes something quite funny. Her terrible decision making, no matter who it affects, is a slapstick gag. And I know obviously this is a comedy, and maybe I'm expecting something that this show was never intending to be. But it just feels like in Chainsmoker Cat, the jokes consistently seem to win. I would like them to eventually make things a lot more uncomfortable, to shine a light on the real darkness of addiction. Some of the best dark comedy makes you laugh and then makes you feel terrible for laughing. It lets the humour expose the tragedy. But right now, I feel like Chainsmoker Cat is doing the opposite. The horrible thing happens, and then a joke kind of makes you not think about it again. Which becomes particularly noticeable when you move beyond smoking, and there's some other darker stuff here. But underneath all those addictions, Chainsmoker Cat should be asking a key question. What void are these people trying to fill? I think if in the back end of this season they actually do that with each of the main characters and each of the addictions, you could have something so heartbreaking and so memorable. I really think it could be special. Let me know if you think I'm just hoping for something that isn't going to happen in a million years. It'd be a shame though if it didn't. Maybe Chainsmoker Cat doesn't want to be an emotionally devastating examination of addiction. Maybe it simply wants to be a gross, uncomfortable comedy about terrible people making terrible decisions. And I guess that's fine. But I think that also limits how meaningful its commentary can ultimately become, especially as more and more of Japan's youth feel disenfranchised and lost, and how they can be fed upon by the evils of this world. So far, it understands that addiction makes people poorer, it damages relationships, however fleetingly they touch on it, and it can destroy standards. But those are observations for the most part in Chainsmoker Cat. They're not given the insight they deserve. I think there's a genuinely powerful anime hidden here. Whether or not the team here wish to discover it remains to be seen. But right now I think Chainsmoker Cat is doing a good job of showing the light-hearted side of the appearance of addiction without ever really getting into the real urine and vomit of it all. That's my take on Chainsmoker Cat. Let me know if you've given up on it, if you're loving it, if you don't want it to get darker, if you're happy with the lightness of it all. Thank you so much. Peace. Take care.